It's so good to have the Premier League back. It was an utterly gorgeous Saturday morning here early. And no Roy Hodgson for Crystal Palace, even though he looked perfectly fine during the press conference. So that meant they didn't have their main man in the dugout, Patrick McCarthy, and then Hodgson's longtime number 2. Oh, bless Ray Lewington and his shorts in charge of this one. Missing a number of key players in a fixture they have not won since 2013. So if you're like me, you were probably thinking, oh, this is a straightforward, easy coast to 3 points. No. And that is why we both love and sometimes hate football. Let's review Aston Villa 3, Crystal Palace 1. I had one of those irritating scheduling conundrums on Saturday morning because the team I coach was suddenly booked to play a game not at home and early. So I had to decide, do I watch the first part of the game and then listen to the rest, or do I avoid the phone? Do I avoid everyone and everything and just wait till I get home to watch the recorded version of the match? And I was going to do option B, but then I woke up at 6:30 and I'm like, nah, I got to watch this game live. And so I did. We left at 70 minutes, and it was stressful, but in the end, very enjoyable to hear how it unfolded. We arrive at the pitch just as the VAR decision is starting to drag on a little bit, which also was nerve-wracking. And then we waited for Dougie to convert the penalty. Now I'm in a fantastic mood. The boys go out and win 3-bagel. And so you then go from a good day to a glorious day. The sun shines brighter, the birds sing louder, the air smells sweeter, food tastes better, a double victory weekend. So while I was having a very disruptive and disjointed Aston Villa match day experience, both watching and listening, one of our most senior correspondents here at the Holy Trinity Show, Samir Gaby, here pictured in a beautiful original Hummel 8789 track zip-up. Wow. She's a beaut, Samir. Well, he had absolute front row seats to what was about to unfold, and I have some beautiful video from Samir a little later on in the broadcast as we officially welcome you to the Holy Trinity Show, named in honor of the original Trinity Road stand, and Trinity also means 3 things. It's the 3 big issues or moments that defined Aston Villa 3 and Crystal Palace 1. Did you honestly see this coming at 87 minutes? I will admit, I did not. Let's kick things off with the key numbers, and I focused on interceptions as our special stat today. Expected goals more than 2-1. Now, our shots on target ratio could probably be a little bit better because right here we're showing only once on target for every 3 attempts, whereas Crystal Palace was 1 for 2. I was also surprised we only had 3 big chances, but when you look at the shot from Duran, it was at the edge of the box, so maybe that's not considered a big chance, even though he turned it into one. 2/3 possession. Now, the interceptions to me and the fact that Palace had 12 is a sign that their structure was very good defensively without the ball, as they tried to prevent us from playing balls into their defensive third, which I think they did effectively. So they were well structured for 87 minutes anyway. I've never had any grievances with Crystal Palace Football Club. Is it my favorite London-based club? No, that's Leyton Orient. Don't ask. But they have a fantastic story. They have a cool ground, and there are currently plans to expand and improve Selhurst Park. And they have a lot of players that fans from around the league would love to have on their team. Eze being the top choice there. If you don't like this player or want him on your team, you simply haven't watched him enough. But there are others. Elise Gehi. We were linked with Edouard, remember? When his agent was peddling him around while up at Celtic there. And despite the fact that Roy Hodgson did a magnificent job last year to make sure they were in the Premier League this year, and despite the fact they were off to a fantastic start, Roy is not going to last forever. So Steve Parrish, the top guy there, who kind of reminds me a little bit of a younger Christian Purslow, polished, very involved in everything. Well, he's going to have a couple of really big football decisions on the horizon here, because There's some good pieces there, but now they need to find a long-term manager, a long-term philosophy, a recruitment strategy, and bring it all together so they could somehow cut through the noise of a very saturated London market and be relevant, because you need to be relevant commercially in the Premier League. Major issue. This could be the number one issue from this game and this show, but mental resilience. You know, the number one enemy of most players is their own minds, the voices inside their heads. And their brains, footballers, are also what distinguish the elite from the rest of us mere mortal muckers. I mean, think about it. We squandered numerous grade A chances in that first half, then had a goal chalked off by VAR in the thinnest of margins, only for Palace to score really early in the second half on what was, let's be honest, their only real chance. Now, the rest of us are sitting there thinking, oh, we're not very good when we concede first. The last time Villa reversed a scoreline and won was at Brighton. I think it was Unai Emery's second game in charge. That was last November. We did get a point from Brentford after conceding first, but how many people in the stadium and watching at home on television would have said, oh, it's just not our day. It's not our day. Thank goodness the players didn't say it's not our day. And of course, supporters have their role to play in all of this as well, which is why Unai Emery is always and very cleverly acknowledging the role of the supporters in the victory. Because as you and I know, Villa Park could be a very toxic place in the past when things didn't go well. And when the supporters get edgy, so do the players. And I haven't felt that, at least through the surround sound speakers of my TV, for quite some time, because we're not the ones playing. Us mere mortals in the terraces and watching on television, we're wired differently. And we fall behind and we abandon all our principles, forget about our preparations, go hell-bent for leather, throw the kitchen sink at it, panic, rush, or try to do it all by yourself. Believe me, I coach a 14-year-old boys soccer team. This is the exact same thing that happens to them. Fall behind, all of a sudden, it's all out the window. I'm going to try to do it all by myself. There I am thinking, oh my goodness, the grief I'm going to get from my Palace pal Paul over this. But Aston Villa, the players on the field, they didn't abandon the principles. They didn't let those thoughts go into their heads. It was the 87th minute when they were still trailing against a very good Crystal Palace team that had their distances right both this way and this way, which is why they had so many interceptions, because we were trying to play those through balls and they cut them out because they got their spacing all right. This was mental resilience at its finest. Big moment, the 58th minute substitutions. Now, I'm going to be honest, I was extremely excited to see Nicolo Zaniolo from the off. I know the left side is not his favored side of the park. He prefers to play on the right or on the inside right channel, almost sometimes like a number 10. But I was not impressed with him. I was just talking about players wanting to do it on their own a couple of moments ago, and I felt that a lot from Zaniolo in this game. Moments where perhaps he could have been a bit more patient and combined rather than trying to do it on his own. And he did still manage to create 3 chances, which is impressive, but for the most part, it didn't happen for him. And I'm okay with that, and I'm not fussed in the least, because the fact that it was his first start in front of his home fans, he wanted to entertain, he wanted to be the man, he wanted to make stuff happen. I love that, and I feel like it is going to happen for him. But on Saturday, it did not come off, and so he came off for Leon Bailey. Bailey had a tough outing for Jamaica against Haiti in Kingston. I watched the game. By the way, there is nothing like CONCACAF. You have no idea. It's as if some of those countries just play without a midfield. It's quite something. Anyway, he struggled for the Reggae Boys in that game, the last of the 2 on the trip. But at Villa Park and on the right side, something of late is clicking with Leon Bailey. He loves to score goals in front of the whole tent. Well taken goal, too, because he snuck in on the blind side of everybody. And frankly, with Crystal Palace having to chase the game, they only had 30% of the possession, basically, so a third of the ball, and all that, tracking and making sure their distances were right. Well, that takes its toll when all of a sudden a pair of fresh legs comes on. It's the last thing you want to see. When Jacob Ramsey comes back, we're going to have some good selection problems again. Coming on with Leon Bailey in the 58th minute was Youri Tielemans, who had a very big shout while on international duty with Belgium this past week. Now, I don't think he intended to undermine Unai Emery when he said, "I came to Villa expecting to play." But that's still a big shout when you do it publicly. And I get it. With these kinds of specific professions, whether it's a footballer or a concert pianist, when you get to the elite level, there is ego involved. And when you're left out, that bruises your ego. Ego is part of football. If you don't have ego in your team, you've got a limp and vanilla side that probably isn't going to be very successful. And you know what? We could make a case that Boubacar Kamara's performances at Newcastle and Liverpool might not have warranted automatic selection in the following Premier League games. But when somebody says, "I came to Villa expecting to play," you know what my response would be as the coach? Yeah, we expected you to play as well. And Unai Emery's response to those comments was very interesting as well, because what he did was he took a giant bucket of water and doused those flames entirely and any remaining glowing embers. I call him the diffuser. And we don't talk about this enough, his tact with public communications and his media relations. He is not going to provide tabloid headlines for anybody, and he's not going to provide billboard material for an opponent's dressing room, nor create a distraction for himself or his players. It takes a lot of emotional intelligence and discipline to do that. And here's where actually I think the language barrier a little bit benefits him greatly. He's not trying to be boring. He's trying to be benign so that the game is the only story. And then Tielemans was left out for the Belgium-Estonia game altogether, which complicates matters, even though it's good for us in terms of keeping his legs fresh. But he can now turn around and say, see, my lack of playing time with my club is now affecting my international career. So this is one that we're going to have to monitor a little bit, even though we know that over the next 2 weeks, Youri Tielemans is probably going to start at least 2 games. And when he came on Saturday, well, he was heavily involved in 2 of the goals, and he lined up to crunch one at the edge of the box, which was blocked. He was lively. He was intelligent. He's totally different than what we already have, which you need. And so I would say that he walked the walk on Saturday, and that's exactly what we need from him. Here's a big issue. Moussa Diaby could be the signing of the summer of all teams, and there's been some good signings, but this dude can do absolutely everything. How about the touch and the finish on the long ball from Pau Torres? What a nice weapon that is to have. Please don't ever call that hoofball. That is an inch-perfect ball received and taken down sublimely and then finished with the next touch. But the player is all over the field in any position. He never ever stops working. He's two-footed, and he has already adapted and integrated to the Premier League after a very, very short period of time. We have a gem here. Do you know we're a week away from autumn here in Canada? It's been absolutely glorious, but this is the time when we generally start looking around and looking at our windows, our roofs, our gutters, all that kind of stuff to make sure we're ready for the coming weather. And so I wanted my roof treated, and I wanted a quote on a new gutter system. And we find this guy who everybody's raving about on Facebook, set up an appointment, and lo and behold, he doesn't show up. So we're waiting around all morning long. Finally, I text him and say, hey, what's up? Oh, sorry. How's 5:30? He shows up, walks around for 5 minutes and says, my wife will send a quote, and she does. It's ridiculously high. I don't know if it's the same where you are, but here, the trades are a gong show. It's impossible to find people who are punctual, who are reliable, and who do great quality work for a good price. And this is why Paul Hadsaker and his 24/7 crew, pictured here, heading up the M6 to a job in Liverpool. This is why they are always busy. Paul shows up when he says he's going to, and if there's an accident on the M6, he phones his client and says, I might be a couple of minutes late. The quote is fair, and the quote is honored, and the work is quality, because Paul wants you to come back. And this isn't just residential, too. I mean, these guys deal with industrial, commercial, and residential, emergencies, and then the fun stuff. So if there's a project waiting and you need reliability, you need quality, and you want to have a long-term relationship with somebody that can do these kinds of things, you'll always find the numbers in the descriptions of these videos. Big issue number 3, double dodged. Crystal Palace had a couple of very good opportunities to double their lead in that second half, and the first one on 71 minutes came from the head of Joel Ward, who was wide open, as was Anderson, who helped the ball onto Ward from the corner in the first place. There will be some questions asked during that debrief as to the marking responsibilities. Is it zonal? Is it man-to-man? Is it hybrid? I can never tell. And then Eza had a couple of opportunities. The first one was smothered by Emi Martinez on the ground, but the next one, he breaks in, and I'm not sure what he's supposed to do here, because Emi Martinez kind of forces his hand by being lively and coming off his line quick. Eza tries the clip, Martinez climbs the ladder and pulls it down. But needless to say, if either of those goes in, I simply cannot see how Aston Villa recovers in this game or earns anything out of the match. Big moment number 2, pivotal penalty. Obviously a monumental moment in this match, and, maybe a huge point in our season for that matter. It will be debated for a long time, and I'm willing to bet an awful lot of money that this moment will be featured in Match Officials Mic'd Up, Howard Webb and Michael Owen's new show, which I think comes out on Mondays or Tuesdays, reviewing precisely these types of refereeing decisions and the process behind them as we get to hear the interactions between match officials. Now, you may be wondering, well, this is potentially a game-winning penalty. Why is it not the number 1 moment? And of course, we're not at this moment had we not equalized first. And I know Ollie Watkins is probably under a lot of pressure from himself because he is yet to score in the Premier League this season, but here he is involved in a goal moment again because he made the right run at the right time, and what a sublime ball to him from Yuri Tielemans. Now, there are 2 aspects to this discussion. One is the incident itself in isolation, what we see in the video. And the second is the process by which we came to a final decision. Ironically, I was listening to this when it happened, and it was the Villa TV feed with Mark Regan on commentary and Ian Taylor as co-commentator. Both of them thought that there was contact on Ollie Watkins before the ball was touched, and they were pretty conclusive about that based on the replays they were being given. When I got home and watched back, the pundit on my broadcast television feed was Paul Robinson, the ex-goalkeeper, and he felt that there was not enough contact to warrant a penalty, that it was harsh, and that Richards actually did well to get a piece of the ball. Paul Robinson felt very pro-Palace in this game on the feed I was watching. Now, what really mattered was that referee Darren England's first impression was penalty, because then it is up to VAR to provide a clear and obvious error or conclusion through video evidence that could overturn the decision. But I have to admit, the longer that this went on, the more I thought it was going to be reversed. And as you know, the vast majority of times that a referee is sent to the screen at field level, the call is usually reversed. Now, given when this occurred in the game, because we're in second half stoppage time and a lot of it at this stage, and obviously, if it's a penalty, there's a pretty good chance it could be the game-winning goal. So I understand why Darren England took so much time reviewing the video and trying to come up with the correct decision here. But I know Howard Webb because I've been on conference calls with him over decisions like this one, and I know exactly what he's going to say. If it takes that long to review, it's not clear and obvious. So Credit to Darren England for being brave enough to stick with his initial instincts, because truly, this could have gone either way. There is contact with Ollie Watkins before Richards gets the poke on it. But is it enough for a penalty? And isn't it interesting, too? Richards was called into action into this game because of the injury to Gay. And I don't think that Watkins or Yuri Tielemans knew that or thought about that when the ball was played and the run was made. But the matchup did work out in their favor, because here's a younger guy who gambled. He said, I'm gambling and I'm going for it right now. You know, we're at the end of the game. He's mentally and physically tired. No, I'm going for it. If he takes one or two more strides and stays on his feet, we don't know if he just blocks the ball away or not. A lot of dynamics in that one moment. Now, if you're a Palace fan watching this, you're thinking, well, obviously you're going to say it's a penalty or an Aston Villa related show. But let me remind you of a couple of recent incidents between these two teams, including last year at Selhurst Park, where Luca Dean was called for a penalty after the ball glanced off his arm as he was jumping to get leverage off, I think it was a corner. Now, after that decision, which was heavily scrutinized, by the way, I think there was an internal review as to what unnatural position really meant. And then, of course, a couple of years before that, there was the notorious, famous, and scandalously corrupt decision by Kevin Friend that somehow punished Jack Grealish for a foul that never occurred, thus eliminating a goal for Villa and what would have been a very useful point in a relegation battle. So, in footballing karma, decisions have this habit of somehow evening out over the years, unless, of course, you're Manchester United. And now we have our penalty taker. And by the way, how amazing is this video from Samir, this vantage point of it? It just goes to show how unflappable Dougie Luiz is, how confident he is. He doesn't have any tells, and he's mixing it up in his 3 penalties taken so far for Villa. What a monstrous outing for this guy who went the distance. A fantastic football player. Loved the gesture with the flag. My son and I listened to this in the car just before we were going to go and warm the team up, and it changed my mood completely in the course of, 7 or 8 minutes. As good and as big as this moment was, though, I think this moment was a consequence of what happened before that. And the number one big moment that defined Aston Villa 3, Crystal Palace 1, Colombian cannon. We may look back on this game at some point down the road and say that was a critical turning point in our season, because huge points gained in September are equally as valuable to those gained in May. And it's funny, too, how sometimes a certain type of goal can have a power, an exhilaration to it that ignites not just the supporters, but obviously the players themselves with this monstrous jolt of adrenaline. And that's exactly what happened in this case. And isn't it ironic that against Crystal Palace, this goal, the power of it, kind of had early Benteke vibes? Don't you think? Do you ever watch any of those police shows where they investigate crimes and then they finally end up at some suspect's house and they use the battering ram to smash the door in? Usually it's 3 big pumps, and then on the third one, the door smashes in and all the cops go flooding into somebody's living room. Well, this goal reminded me of that somehow, because you had Ollie Watkins with a strike that was blocked. Duran had a long shot from the edge of the 18 saved. Then Watkins hits the crossbar, and then finally the battering ram comes out, and it's John Duran who smashes it in. Now, we had seen a little glimpse of his technique and power at the end of the Man City away game last year, where he hits the crossbar out of almost nothing. We're all sitting there going, oh my goodness, this kid can fire a ball. But I could not believe what I saw when I watched it after coming home from my son's game. Thinking back to summer, how many people in Villa Nation would have predicted that Cameron Archer would be with us at this stage and John Duran would have been out on loan? Because after all, he's still a teenager. And at the time when they signed him, It really felt like a very long-term project, even though there were some big clubs chasing his signature. And this probably would have had to have started before Unai Emery even arrived. So he didn't really have his fingerprints on this project. And I have to admit, when I heard that he was coming on in this game for John McGinn, I wondered, even though you've scored 2 well-taken goals at Villa Park, are you ready to impact and affect a game under the current circumstances? And this is why we should never question Unai Emery. He has made every single player on this squad better and more confident. And this is why we paid Chicago Fire $18 million to jump ahead of the queue and many other teams and land him early. Duran had a decent effort in the 72nd minute from about 18 yards out along the ground, which he lashed at, and Johnson saved comfortably, but it was a warning shot. This one from 16 yards out was unstoppable, and what is incredible about it, never mind the control from the chest down. That's hard enough on its own. But he catches this ball on its way up, and he still managed to keep it under the crossbar with power. The ball hits the roof of the netting from 16 yards out with power. How many of those have you seen on their way up that end up going way over the top? The ball wants to go up as it's rising, and he catches it as plumb and as true as you dream about all your life. And this moment was like an explosion of energy, limbs everywhere, players believing, looking at the clock, thinking, hey, we're going to get a lot of stoppage time here because of Johnson being down, and this Villa Park winning streak is going to remain intact. It is so hard in the Premier League to reverse a scoreline. I told you during the Liverpool show, you score first, you have a 73% chance of winning that game. And what does Villa do in stoppage time? They go out and they reverse the scoreline. Remember this, my friend, because this is a huge moment, and it would have never happened without this strike. When I watched the second half again for the third time, I paid way more attention to John Duran and some of the other things that he did in this game, which included a lot of very simple yet effective touches that kept us in possession, kept us ticking over. His movement, very good off the ball. He dispossessed a player with power and pace, and that allowed us to move forward once again. I feel as though he is connected with his teammates and he understands his role in the team already. And you notice when he scored the goal, he wasn't overjoyed or over-emotional. Looked like a guy well beyond his years, like 25 years of age or even older. Looked like a guy who wanted to now go on and get the game-winning goal. John Duran has always, throughout his entire career, played a couple, if not more, years above his actual chronological age because he's this big unit, and he always has been. And now I think we're starting to see some glimpses into why so many clubs had him on their radar. There it is, a really big moment that helped secure 3 points. I'm not going to forget this game for a very long time. Let's review the categories we follow throughout the season. Of course, I've added a whole bunch more this year, but I mean, the record at Villa Park is exactly where we want to see it. 6 points out of 6. VAR did take away the Diaby goal, so that's -1 on the season, and that meant that Diaby still stuck on 2 in the combined goals for. Penalty means our set pieces have improved now to -1, and that's 2 penalty kicks in the league so far this year. It wasn't a bottom or a top 6 battle. We're now plus on the goals for, goals allowed ledger, but we weren't able to get a clean sheet, which is the only real blemish, I think, on the whole thing. And now a quick respite from the Premier League as we turn our attentions to round 1 of the group stage of the Europa Conference League in a very intriguing matchup at Legia Warsaw. We're going to need all of our players over these next couple of weeks because the squad will be well and truly tested, as will the Holy Trinity Show production schedule. So we need our Ramses and Morenos and Diego Carloses and even Big Tims. Remember Big Tim? I wonder what the plan is for Big Tim, whether he's going to stick around or not. Regardless, I look at Aston Villa as being heavy favorites to progress from this stage and probably to win all 3 of their home games. Just the way they're going right now at Villa Park, I think that's a fair expectation. So these away games are bonus points, frankly, and it could expedite our passage into the next round, which will then allow us to rotate the squad a little bit more heavily as we get into some of the heavier fixture congestion later in the fall. So hopefully Villa can go and set a very good tone in Warsaw on Thursday. A team, by the way, that drew 1-1 on the weekend. They are the most successful historic club in Poland, and I'm dying to get some away day footage if you are planning on going to Poland to take in this game. I really am excited about getting some of the feel, maybe, behind the scenes in and around the stadium. That truly was one to savor. I'll never forget where I was or what I was doing when Villa came from behind to beat Crystal Palace after the 87-minute mark. And more importantly than how it affected us, how about for the players? They now have validation in the project, again, that what they're doing is the right thing, that they need to stick with the process, the principles, the preparations. They have a reference point. The next time they don't score first, fall behind in a game, they can say, we were down 1 bagel in the 87th minute, and bang, 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 still managed to take all 3 points. That might be more critical to us down the road than even the points themselves. Enjoy it. And until the Europa Conference League, up the mighty Villa.